For 54 years, one question has haunted humanity. Did we really go to the moon, or was it the greatest deception ever pulled on the human race? Millions of people across the globe have spent decades analysing every frame, every shadow, every inconsistencies in NASA's footage, and for 54 years, NASA has had one response: trust us. But something just happened that nobody saw coming. 3 days ago, images surfaced from a source that has nothing to do with NASA, nothing to do with the United States government. A completely independent space agency on the other side of the planet pointed their cameras at a very specific location on the lunar surface: the Sea of Tranquility, the exact coordinates where Neil Armstrong supposedly planted the American flag in 1969. What they found in that photograph, we need to talk about it, because when you see what's inside that marked circle, when you understand who took this image and why it matters, everything you thought you knew about the moon landing conspiracy is about to shift. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I show you what they discovered, you need to understand why this image is different from every other piece of evidence that's ever been presented. You need to understand the chain of custody. Who took it? Why did they take it? And why conspiracy theorists can't simply dismiss this one. Let's start from the beginning. July 20th, 1969. 600 million people watched grainy black and white footage of Neil Armstrong climbing down a ladder and stepping onto the lunar surface. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The moment that supposedly won America the space race. The moment that cemented American dominance during the Cold War. The moment that changed everything. Except, did it actually happen? See, here's where things get interesting. Within months of the broadcast, people started asking questions. Engineers, photographers, scientists, people who understood physics and lighting and radiation. And the more they looked at NASA's evidence, the more things didn't add up. The American flag waves in the footage. It ripples like there's wind blowing on it, but the moon has no atmosphere, no air, no wind. So why is the flag moving? NASA's explanation? The flag has a horizontal rod across the top to keep it extended, and the movement came from the astronauts handling the pole. Okay, maybe, but that doesn't explain everything. Look at the photographs from the surface. Multiple photographs show shadows falling in completely different directions. Shadows that shouldn't be possible with a single light source. The sun. In a vacuum with no atmosphere to scatter light, shadows should be parallel. They should all point the same direction, but they don't. NASA says it's because of the uneven lunar terrain creating optical illusions. The hills and craters make shadows appear to fall at different angles. Plausible. But is it proof? Then there's the radiation problem. To get to the moon, astronauts had to pass through the Van Allen radiation belts, zones of intense radiation trapped by Earth's magnetic field. Multiple scientists at the time said the radiation levels were lethal, that no amount of shielding in 1969 could have protected the astronauts during the journey. NASA insists they timed the trajectory to minimize exposure, and that the spacecraft's aluminum hull provided adequate protection. They say the astronauts received radiation doses equivalent to a chest X-ray, but some physicists still dispute this. They say the math doesn't work, that the exposure time was too long, that the shielding was too thin. And here's the thing that really makes people suspicious. The context, the historical context that gets overlooked. It's 1969. America is losing the space race. The Soviet Union put the first satellite in orbit, the first animal in space, the first human in space, the first spacewalk, first probe to hit the moon, first images of the far side of the moon. The Soviets are dominating every milestone, and America is falling behind. The political pressure is massive. President Kennedy had promised America would land a man on the moon before the end of the decade. That deadline is approaching. The entire world is watching. The Cold War is at its peak, and losing the space race means losing the propaganda war. It means admitting Soviet technology is superior, Soviet science is superior, Soviet society is superior. So the question becomes, how far would the United States government go to avoid that humiliation? Would they fake it? Would they stage the greatest achievement in human history in a television studio? And this is where conspiracy theorists point to something very specific. Something most people don't know about. In the late 1960s, NASA hired Stanley Kubrick, the director who had just finished filming 2001, Spaceboat Odyssey, the movie that showed incredibly realistic zero-gravity sequences and space scenes that looked more authentic than anything Hollywood had ever produced. Kubrick had access to cutting-edge special effects technology. He understood lighting and camera work better than almost anyone alive. Some conspiracy theorists believe NASA didn't hire Kubrick as a consultant. They believe they hired him as a director. That the moon landing footage we saw wasn't broadcast from space. It was broadcast from a soundstage. That Kubrick filmed the whole thing, and the government swore him to secrecy. Is there proof of this? No hard evidence, but there are strange coincidences. Kubrick's next film, Shining, contains bizarre hidden messages that some interpret as coded confessions about faking the moon landing. The kid in the film wears an Apollo 11 sweater. Room 237, which plays a major role in the film, is supposedly symbolic of the moon's distance from Earth, 237,000 miles. Kubrick died under mysterious circumstances just days after screening his final film, Eyes Wide Shut, a movie about secret societies and hidden truths. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe there's more to the story. For decades, this is where the debate has remained stuck. NASA provides evidence, but it all comes from NASA. It all comes from the same source with the most to gain from the landing being real. It's circular reasoning. They're the plaintiff, the witness, and the judge. How can anyone verify the truth when there's no independent confirmation? Conspiracy theorists have been asking for one thing: show us evidence from a source that isn't connected to NASA. A third party with no political agenda, no financial incentive, no reason to lie, and that request seemed impossible because who else has the technology to photograph the lunar surface? Who else has sent missions to the moon? For the longest time the answer was nobody we could trust. Russia and China have space programs, but they have their own political motivations. They're not neutral parties. But then something changed. In 2019, a country that most people don't associate with space exploration launched an ambitious mission: India. The Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, sent Chandrayaan-2 to the moon, not to land on it, to orbit it, to map the entire lunar surface with high-resolution cameras. Now, here's what makes India different. They're not involved in the Cold War politics. They have no historical stake in proving or disproving the Apollo missions. They're not trying to one-up America or Russia. They're simply conducting scientific research. And their mission had a very specific objective: create detailed maps of the lunar surface, document geological features, search for water ice, and yes, photograph areas of historical interest, including the Sea of Tranquility. When ISRO announced they would be imaging the Apollo landing sites, conspiracy theorists paid attention. This was it. This was the independent verification they'd been demanding for decades. If India's cameras flew over the Apollo 11 landing site and found nothing, no equipment, no footprints, no evidence, it would be the smoking gun, proof that NASA had lied. But if they found something, well, that would change everything too. Chandrayaan-2 entered lunar orbit in August 2019. Its high-resolution camera began scanning the surface. Months passed. The orbiter transmitted thousands of images back to Earth. ISRO released photos of craters, mountains, and geological formations. And then, quietly, without major fanfare, they released something else. An image of the Sea of Tranquility. The exact coordinates of the Apollo 11 landing site. And inside a marked circle on that photograph, there's something there. Before I tell you what it is, understand what this means. This image wasn't taken by NASA. It wasn't processed by American scientists. It came from ISRO's orbiter using India's own camera technology, a completely independent data source. The chain of custody is clean. There's no room for NASA to have manipulated it. No opportunity for Hollywood special effects. No way for the United States government to have staged this. So what did Chandrayaan-2 find? Inside that circle, there's a structure, a piece of hardware, sitting on the lunar surface exactly where NASA said the Apollo 11 lunar module would be, the descent stage. When Armstrong and Aldrin left the moon, they only took the ascent stage, the top part of the lunar module that had the engine to launch them back to the command module. The descent stage, the bottom part with the landing legs, stayed behind. According to NASA, it's still there, a permanent monument to humanity's first steps on another world. And India's camera found it. The object in the image matches the exact dimensions of the Apollo 11 descent stage. 4 landing legs, the right shape, the right size, in the exact location NASA has claimed for 54 years. But it gets even more interesting. The image doesn't just show the descent stage. If you look closely at the photograph, you can see disturbances in the lunar soil around the landing site. Patterns that match footprints, the trails the astronauts would have made walking between the lunar module and the various experiments they deployed. You can see the area where they planted the American flag. The rectangular shadow is still visible in the soil. You can see the scientific equipment they left behind, the seismometer array that measured moonquakes, the laser reflector that scientists have been bouncing laser beams off for 50 years to measure the Earth-Moon distance. All of it, still there, exactly where NASA said it would be. Now, I know what you're thinking. How do we know this image is real? How do we know India didn't collaborate with NASA? How do we know this isn't just another layer of the conspiracy? Fair questions. But here's the thing, India has nothing to gain from lying. Their space program is independent. They're not beholden to American interests. In fact, India has historically been more aligned with Russia during the Cold War era. If anything, they would have had political motivation to expose an American hoax, not cover it up. Moreover, other countries with lunar orbiters have now confirmed similar findings. Japan's Selena mission photographed the Apollo 15 landing site and identified the descent stage. China's Chang'e 2 orbiter captured images of the Apollo 17 site. Multiple independent space agencies, multiple sets of cameras, multiple photographs, all showing the same thing. The hardware is still there. But here's where this gets even deeper. The conspiracy theorists who have spent decades analyzing NASA's footage, questioning every shadow, every flag movement, every technical detail, they're not all backing down. Some are doubling down. They're saying these new images are part of a larger conspiracy, that India, Japan and China are all in on it now, that the global space community is protecting the lie. And you know what? I understand the skepticism. Once you start questioning official narratives, it's hard to know where to stop. If they lied about one thing, maybe they're lying about everything. But there's a logical problem with that theory. Think about how many people would need to be involved in a conspiracy of that scale. Not just NASA astronauts and engineers, not just American government officials. Now you'd need thousands of Indian scientists, Japanese researchers, Chinese space program workers, all keeping the same secret, all coordinating their fake images, all risking their careers and reputations to maintain a lie that benefits. Who exactly? The more people involved in a conspiracy, the harder it is to maintain. Secrets leak, people talk, especially when there's no clear benefit to staying silent. And here's the kicker. If the moon landing was faked, why haven't the Russians exposed it? The Soviet Union had every reason to embarrass the United States. They had their own tracking stations, monitoring Apollo transmissions, their own scientists analyzing the data. If there was any evidence the landing was staged, the Soviets would have been the first to shout it from the rooftops. But they didn't. They congratulated America and acknowledged the achievement. Does that prove the landing was real? Not by itself. But combined with India's independent photographs, Japan's confirmation, China's images, and the physical evidence that remains on the lunar surface, evidence that anyone with a powerful enough telescope can potentially observe, the cumulative weight of proof becomes overwhelming. So where does this leave us? For 54 years, the moon landing conspiracy has survived because NASA's evidence came from NASA. It was a closed loop. But now we have independent verification from multiple sources with no political motivation to lie. We have third-party confirmation that the hardware Armstrong and Aldrin left behind is exactly where they said it was. Does this mean every question about the Apollo missions has been answered? No. There are still anomalies in photographs that haven't been fully explained. There are still technical details that seem inconsistent. And there's still the very real history of governments lying to their citizens about important matters. Healthy skepticism is good. Questioning official narratives is important. But at some point, evidence accumulates to the point where denial becomes harder to justify than acceptance. India's Chandrayaan-2 image isn't just another photograph. It's independent verification from a neutral party. It's the third-party evidence that conspiracy theorists have been demanding for decades. And what it shows is this. Something is sitting on the Sea of Tranquility. Something with 4 landing legs. Something that matches the Apollo 11 lunar module descent stage in every measurable way. Something that's surrounded by disturbed soil patterns consistent with human activity. Something that's exactly where NASA said it would be. Does that end the conspiracy? Probably not. Because conspiracies don't die from evidence. They die when people stop believing them, and belief is a powerful thing. But for those willing to follow the evidence, wherever it leads, India just provided the most compelling proof yet that on July 20th, 1969, 2 American astronauts really did walk on the moon. And that hardware they left behind, it's still there, waiting in the silent vacuum of space, a monument to human achievement. Photographed not by the country that put it there, but by an independent witness half a century later. Make of that what you will.